Straight
I was talking. The topic was I was talking about gratuity being extra. I did a whole video on this episode of my podcast as well. If you want to hear more detail on the subject, but the thing that I was explaining is what I'll tell you all is that if you want more freedom in your life, let's just say, for example, in your career, you want more freedom in your career, but you don't like your job or the prospects of the job, you get 100% freedom by starting your own business. As soon as you start your own business, you have all the freedom you want. You can do whatever you want, when you want, how you want, with whom you want, and where you want. You are completely in control. You have complete freedom to do as you wish. The trade-off of that freedom is that you have to give up all the security that comes with a job. Because at a job, you have the security of at least knowing that there's a paycheck coming every 2 weeks as long as you're employed. You know that check's coming, so you have the security of that money. But the trade-off of that security is that you got to give up some freedom because you have to follow the rules of the job. You got to adhere to the dress code. You got to adhere to the work policy. You got to listen to your boss and your supervisors. You got to deal with coworkers who you might not like. You got to come to work at a certain time, leave at a certain time. Your life may have to revolve around that job, and you're giving up the freedom of being able to do everything you want to do in order to have the security of the check. Whereas on the flip side, as I just explained, if you want the freedom to do as you want, you got to give up the security of knowing that the check is coming in all the time. Now, is there a way that you can have both the freedom of being in control and the security, because you can set your business up to where you know the money's coming in consistently? Of course you can. And yes, you can do that. I want you to get the bigger point of what I'm saying here, though, which is in order to get 100% freedom from a position of 100% security, you got to give up a lot of that security to get into a position of freedom, and you can eventually build your way up into both. Look at the United States of America. We used to have the freedom of walking straight up to the gate at an airport. If you're old enough, you remember that era when you could walk right up to the gate, even if you weren't getting on the plane, but you could watch one of your friends walk onto the plane. But then 9/11 happened, and because people were afraid, we accepted the quote-unquote security of the Transportation Security Administration. I believe that's what it stands for, the TSA. And the security that they provide, allegedly, cost us the freedom of moving about as we want it. Now you can't bring lotion on an airplane, a bigger bottle of lotion on an airplane. You got to pay for a TSA pre-check if you don't want to have to take your shoes off during the security check. And now they just created these jobs for all these people, and now they have this big line of delineation between people who are just walking in the airport and anyone who can get close to the gate. So we gave up some of our freedoms in order to feel more secure. And one of the things that you notice this with COVID, you notice it with a lot of safety precautions, quote unquote, to get put in place by people in positions of authority at different levels, whether the governmental level or even at your local level, that if people are made to feel afraid, whether they have a real reason to be afraid or not, they will quickly and easily give up as many freedoms as possible under the assurance of safety. This is what human beings do. And this is just on a mass level. That's pretty much how it works. And the opportunity then for you becomes the following: noting when most people are willing to give up their freedom in order to be safe, ask yourself, are they really safe from anything? And is there any real, clear and present danger that they're facing that is causing them to give up their freedom? The answer is usually no. So if you can build the mental toughness and the rational thinking to look at the situation and say, there's nothing objectively here that I need to be afraid of, therefore I'm not going to give up my security in order to get the freedom, you can start to create having a combination of both. But this starts in the mindset. And if you just follow the masses of people, you'll never get there, because the masses of people are usually going to do what whoever is in a position of authority is telling them to do. And often people in positions of authority will entice you to give up all your freedoms to them so that they can, quote unquote, secure you and keep you safe by doing what they want you to do. You even go back to a TV show like The Sopranos, and what the mob guys would do, they would go around to some local business and say, hey, we'll protect your business. And a person might say, well, my business doesn't need protection. Nothing's happening to my business. And the mob guy might say, well, tomorrow morning, you might notice that somebody broke your window. No, if you pay us for security, for protection, then we will take care of your business. But in order to get that security from the mob guys, you had to give up the freedom of having control over your money, because you had to pay them every week in order to keep your business quote unquote safe. It's extortion. And the government does the exact same thing. The medical system does the exact same thing. And if you look around in your life, you're going to notice every place in which you have given up the freedom to do what you want to do, you have given up some security, and often it is extorted from you. It's not something that you just gladly handed out, or maybe you feel like you gladly handed it out, because most people don't admit to being extorted when they've already given up their freedom because they can't undo the situation. It's you think you gladly handed it out because you were psyoped, you were conned into giving up your freedom in order to feel safe, not to actually be safe, but to feel safe. And those are two different things. So be very careful, and keep in mind the bigger picture idea of this whole whole video that I'm talking about here, which is the more freedom you want, the more security you have to be willing to give up, or again, the more of the impression of security you have to be willing to give up. Because most of the time when you're giving up quote unquote security, you're not really. Did you give up any security by not taking the COVID jab? Not really. I mean, did you put yourself in any position of danger by not taking it? Not really. But the people who took it are going to tell you that you did something wrong, of course. But of course they can't prove that, because we see how that turned out. They will just accept, hey, yeah, I gave up some of my freedom for the safety of taking the jab, and they'll come up with rationalizations for why this makes sense, but we all know that it doesn't. And this is the reason why I'm telling you that if you have to pick one between freedom and security, always choose freedom. Always choose freedom, because you always have the option of giving some up in the times that you want to, but make sure you give it up on your terms, not on terms that someone else is enforcing or trying to convince you of. Because once you give up that freedom, you ain't getting it back. It's not like you can go to the mafia and say, hey, I've been paying you guys $200 a week for security, but now I don't need it anymore. That's not going to work. Once they got you, once they're in, and they can't get out. You got to be careful of this. Again, look at the TSA in the United States. Is that ever going away? No. All right, we gave up that freedom and we ain't never getting it back. So that's the challenging part about giving up freedom, is you can never give it back. You can give up security and go get more security later on. You cannot give up freedom and get more back. Once you give it up, it's gone. So be very careful with this. WorkOnYourGameUniversity.com. You want to have me as your direct coach? Get working with me on getting your mind in the right place around things like what we're talking about here, and then a strategy to make it work, the things you're trying to do personally and professionally, a system to make that strategy work over and over again, and the accountability to implement. Go to WorkOnYourGameUniversity.com. Link down below in the description. Work on your game.